Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining today's program. I'm Nina Prescott with the Building Energy Exchange, and I'm really happy to welcome you to today's program, RTEM plus Tenants, Energy Management for Leased Spaces. So while folks are filtering in here, I'll just go over the focus of this program on the importance and benefits of engaging tenants in energy management, and it will also provide an overview of NYSERDA's RTEM plus Tenants program. We're also very lucky to include a real-life account of the challenges and successes in implementing tenant energy efficiency measures. So really glad to have this program today, and I want to shout out to our co-hosts of this program. Thank you so much to ASHRAE New York for collaborating and developing this program with us. I also want to thank our speakers, Thomas Ye, an RTEM advisor at NYSERDA, and Dana Schneider, Senior Vice President and Director of Energy and Sustainability at Empire State Realty Trust, as well as our moderator, Michael Daschle, Vice President of Operations at Brookfield. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining in today's program. Before we get started, I also want to direct your attention to the Zoom Q&A. Please be sure to post all of your questions there throughout the program today, and there'll be time at the end for a bit of a moderated panel discussion where your questions will be answered. So with that, I will pass it off to Thomas to get started.
Hi, everybody. Again, welcome. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Thomas Ye. I work for NYSERDA as a consultant and advisor on the RTEM program. I'm here to tell you about NYSERDA's RTEM Plus Tenants program. But first, you should know that this is not NYSERDA's first real-time energy management program. Many of you may already be familiar with the RTEM program launched in 2016. We internally refer to that program as RTEM 1.0. Today, we are sharing with you the RTEM 2.0. So let's get started. Next slide, please. We noticed that the building owners primarily implemented the 1.0 system in the central plant and equipment located in the building's core. In the new RTEM plus Tenants program, we are now requiring the monitoring of lease spaces with the participation of the office tenants. So why do we want to engage tenants? First, I don't think it's a mystery to say that tenants' involvement is crucial to realize the saving potential and achieve lasting energy and emission reductions. I will quantify this point on the next slide. Reducing loads in the tenant spaces is a crucial opportunity to comply with local law 97. In most properties, owners can only go so far with loads under their direct control. The situation was made abundantly clear when buildings were emptied in 2020 during the statewide COVID shutdown. Also, environmental, social, and governance issues, or ESG, are now a top concerns of corporate management and boards. As a result, many large office tenants now have an ESG program. We've seen companies with successful ESG programs have greater access to capital and stronger corporate brand. These are desirable tenants, and these tenants want help to operationalize their ESG initiatives in their lease offices. However, if working with tenants on energy efficiency were easy, everyone would have done it. To be sure, we recognize many ownerships are proactive and have been engaging tenants for some time. Nonetheless, I suggest that every owner has to work around that split incentive barrier. That is, those responsible for the capital assets that consumes energy are not the same entity as those that have to pay for the energy consumed. However, local law 97 has changed that equation. NYSERDA's RTEM plus Tenant program aims to support owners with data, human resources, and funding. Our goal is the same as yours, to save energy and decarbonize the energy used in the building. We've learned from 1.0 and other programs that engaging tenants is absolutely necessary to meet this goal. Next slide, please. I suspect every one of you has heard someone quoting a percentage of a building's energy attributed to the building's tenants. Anyways, those who own or operate facilities may have access to some meter data and have already figured it out for your building. Now, I don't own buildings. Nonetheless, the RTEM program worked with many qualified vendors. So we surveyed these vendors, asking them to quantify a portion of the building's energy under tenants' control. Several vendors point out that commercial office buildings exist to serve the tenants. Therefore, everything that uses energy in the building, whether directly consumed in tenant spaces, common areas, or amenities, is for the tenant. Consequently, the answer is always 100%, right? That is, of course, correct. However, we still need to know how much of a building's energy is tenants' direct control versus the owner's control to develop effective energy management strategies. Not surprisingly, what we got are ranges. So I've picked representative replies from 5 vendors that charted their responses. For example, vendor A said 35 to 68% are controlled by tenants, while vendor E noted 65 to 92%. Obviously, the answer differed by building and by tenants in the building. The upper ranges of facility with tenant dedicated heating and cooling equipment or have heating and cooling equipment located floor by floor. The lower ranges are facilities with a central plant for heating and cooling. For your building, whether the percentage is in this chart or some other proportions, whatever it is too much to be left unmanaged. So for example, can you imagine even just 35% of your central plant's energy is unmanaged? I suspect not. Next slide, please. How could NYSERDA help? First and foremost, we are offering funding. The RTEM plus tenant program will cost share up to 33% of the turnkey install cost of a qualified RTEM system. In addition, if the building already has an RTEM system from the 1.0 program, we will cost share 33% to upgrade the system to meet the RTEM plus tenant requirements. Regardless, the owners are responsible for the balance. Additionally, we will also cost share 33% of up to 3 years of qualified RTEM services, which now must include consultation with the tenants. Next slide, please. Owner from 1.0 told us that they appreciate NYSERDA pre-qualifying the system and service vendors. Our effort made it easier for the owners to select a vendor and get started. Actually, they would like us to be more rigorous in our process. Consequently, all previously qualified vendors under the 1.0 RTEM program must undergo the new qualification process since we have elevated the threshold capabilities. We are now actively recruiting vendors, but the higher capability thresholds have not allowed very many into the program compared to 1.0. We're now requiring machine learning as part of the analytic capability for system vendors. However, applying AI to buildings is still an emerging science. Nonetheless, we want to attract the most advanced data science minds to use their big brains to make buildings more efficient. For service vendors, this program requires the consultants to develop a bespoke tenant engagement plan for building on behalf of the building's owner and to provide energy management consultation to the tenants, again, under the owner's guidance. Although we are actively looking, we have not found many vendors that meet our service qualifications. If anyone attending today works for a consulting firm with experience in tenant energy management, please reach out to us. We want to work with you. What will continue in 2.0 is vendors are responsible for all the deliverables to NYSERDA. Consequently, the owners and the tenants do not have any requisite deliverables to NYSERDA. We pay vendors directly, so the owners only need to budget the portion that NYSERDA does not cover. Although NYSERDA may not interact directly with the owner or the tenant in a specific project, we do not let it operate unchecked. Instead, we work with the project vendor to ensure owners and tenants realize the program's many intended benefits. Next slide, please. If you're starting from scratch, we have a set of resources to help you get started. They are all on the RTEM website. The links will be provided to you. NYSERDA developed these resources as part of the 1.0 program. Let's start with the case studies, since everybody is always asking about them. We refer to them as success stories. Many of them are only a few pages, so it's an easy read. Also, we constantly adding new success stories, so check back often. If you are new to RTEM, NYSERDA also publish a set of guides to explain RTEM, from topologies to analytics. You can always approach NYSERDA to answer questions just about anything concerning RTEM by submitting a question to us from the website. Our team has 6+ years of experience, interview over 200+ vendors, and incentivize almost 900 facilities. Consequently, there's very likely anything about RTEM that we cannot help to address. But if we can't, I'm confident we can at least point you in the right direction. Next slide, please. If RTEM is new to you, just in case, or as a refresher, I've included this slide as a background. RTEM, or real-time energy management, was coined by NYSERDA in 2016. Nonetheless, there were and still are many industry acronyms for similar platforms. For example, DOE international labs use EMIS, or Energy Management and Information System, to refer to what we call RTEM. You may also have heard of intelligent building systems, continuous commissioning systems, fault detection and diagnostic, or FDD systems, or advanced system optimization software, and so on. They all mean the same thing. We use the term RTEM to describe the combination of hardware, software, and cloud computing to continuously stream building data securely into a persistent repository in the cloud. Advanced analytics then process and extract actionable insights from the building data. All parts of the data extraction are included in the definition and therefore eligible to receive incentive. In the 1.0 program, many projects layer on top of the already existing central building automation systems or control systems, extracting data from the mechanical equipment and plants controlled by the BAS and streaming the data to the cloud. Also adding IoT devices, meter sensors, and even control devices within RTEM project are common. We use RTEM services to refer to both the software as a service, or SaaS, and the human experts identifying and recommending the energy conservation measures. Unlike other programs where the intervention is one time, we instructed the RTEM service providers to be persistent and ongoing. For example, ECMs identified but not implemented are not shelved and forgotten. We train the RTEM service vendors to continuously remind customers of the unimplemented ECM opportunities while finding new conservation opportunities. Next slide, please. We designed the RTEM Plus tenant incentive to support two main categories of upgrades. The first category is required for every project. Simply speaking, we want you to monitor as much of the building's energy use in tenant sub-meters as practicable. To accommodate as many commercial office buildings as possible, we have set a threshold of 75%. That is because we appreciate that there may be tremendous cost to meet 100% for every building. Therefore, every building needs to monitor at least 75% of the building's energy footprint and 75% of the tenant square footage. Also, we require whole building real-time occupancy counting. Usually that means occupancy counting in the building's main entrance lobby or integrating with the building's access control system. Additionally, the building's utility and tenant usage must be disaggregated and visualized by significant end uses, such as lighting, heating, cooling, ventilation, perhaps data centers, et cetera, et cetera. We will allow disaggregation using analytics or adding submeters by end users, such as installing a meter or a CT on all the lighting panels. You can also do it by a combination of analytics and submetering. The second category consists of what we recommend, but is not required. For example, you may install submeters to disaggregate end uses for a significant tenant, or install occupancy counting on that tenant's floor or inside the lease space, because the tenant may want to have real-time occupancy counting for workspace management, as an example. We will also incentivize additional air quality sensors inside the tenant space for some particular tenant that's concerned about that, as another example, but these are not required to participate in the program. Another optional scope that we will support is integration with Tenant Experience app. Some owners are beginning to explore Tenant Experience app to share environmental wellness and now energy information with tenants. If that is what you like to do, we encourage you to include it in your RTEM plus tenants work scope. Next slide, please. I'd like to share a few slides about the benefits of having RTEM in your building. You can't manage what you don't know. RTEM allows building staff to monitor the spaces, not just the mechanical equipment, with just the supply and return air temperature. As a result, building staff can be proactive about comfort issues, stipulated in the lease conditions, while ensuring the building is not operating wastefully. FDD capability are also something that building operators find helpful. The building staffs are not overwhelmed by cryptic alarms. Instead, FDD provides intelligent diagnostics to help to troubleshoot. Moreover, property managers can compare their building performance using benchmark tools offered by the RTEM systems. Next slide, please. Wellness is now top of mind in just about every building since COVID has been with us. It is also one of the measures that bolster tenants' confidence to return to the office. Since 2020, we now know that we should not just bring in 100% outside air 100% of the time. RTEM ensures the building has plenty of outside air given the occupancy level while not wasting energy treating and conditioning outside air unnecessarily. One of the underappreciated RTEM benefit is the integration of additional sensor and IoT devices like an environmental sensor. RTEM brings in advanced cloud-based data infrastructure to ensure data from IoT sensors and metering devices are stored perpetually. These data are not just put into yet another silo, but are available for a single pane of glass dashboard and incorporated into control strategies. A reliable and high-performance data infrastructure goes a long way to future-proof the building as innovative sensors and IoT devices come to the market. In addition, you have cloud storage to keep the data and use it with all the other data from the building instead of creating more data silos. Next slide, please. Another benefit of RTEM is optimizing the schedule of large mechanical equipment that uses a lot of energy. So just this one measure could make a big difference in the property sustainability and efficiency. For instance, if a central plants operate 12 hours a day, reducing just 1 hour from the schedule saves over 8% of energy and reduces the equipment's wear and tear. Today's algorithm considers many variables that affects when the building should start up or ramp down a central plant, such as weather, occupancy, the temperature of the interior space before introducing conditioned air, the history of startup and ramp downs, et cetera, et cetera. This is also one use case where systems are using machine learning more and more. Marketing offer refer to this category of algorithms as creating a digital twin. Of course, machine learning may not work very well in the beginning, but algorithms learn from data and will fine-tune themselves to operate better and better. I believe it won't be too far off in the future when our electricity grid need more flexible loads. Many RTEM systems can forecast load shapes by end uses, allowing owners and operators to find loads that can be shifted or shed if the grid needs support. This type of load flexibility and responsiveness could become another source of revenue, not too different from today's demand response programs. Next slide, please. Again, if it were trivial to engage the tenants, everyone would have done it already, and there won't be any need for NYSERDA's assistance. It is challenging, but it's also necessary for our buildings to realize their potential. We recognize it is a continuous improvement process. So wherever you decide to start, engaging with your tenants at whatever pace they are comfortable with will still lead to helpful improvements, even if we're just motivated by Local Law 97. After all, this is a journey. Many of you already started this journey years ago. Others still needs to get started. RTEM plus Tenants provides funding, resources, and data to help you. So if you are ready to meet the high standards of participation NYSERDA has set for RTEM plus Tenant projects, please start your journey with us. Next slide, please. You can get started on the journey by visiting the NYSERDA website, or by all means, contact us. Next slide, please. My colleague Dana Schneider from the Empire State Realty Trust will now share ESRT's experience with RTEM. ESRT is one of the earliest participants in the 1.0 program. Under Dana's leadership, ESRT is again the first portfolio owner to step up to RTEM plus Tenant program. Many of you are already aware of Dana's many accomplishments, so I will only briefly introduce her ESRT responsibilities. Dana is responsible for defining, leading, and executing a comprehensive program for all energy and sustainability initiatives at ESRT, including industry-leading best practices and coordinating and developing the company's ESG and wellness programs and reporting. In addition, Dana focuses on analyzing and implementing actionable measures, which drives energy efficiency and performance at the whole building, systems, and tenant level, including proactive planning for Local Law 97 and 80 by 50. The baton is yours, Dana.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. So Empire State Realty Trust is the company that I work for. And I think, Nina, are you advancing the slides?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you want to go to the next one? Thanks. So Empire State Realty Trust is a publicly traded real estate investment trust. Just to give some quick background on us, we own over 10 million square feet of space, primarily in the New York City metropolitan area. And our focus has been for years on leading the way with pathway to carbon neutrality, never compromising healthy spaces, and also always making the business case. So we're responsible to all of our stakeholders for energy efficiency, emissions reduction, sustainability, and healthy and well spaces. So one of the things that we are famous for is our groundbreaking work in the Empire State Building, where I'm sitting right now. I can't see myself, so hopefully you guys could see me talking to you. But we have reduced emissions 54% in the Empire State Building, and we're committed to carbon neutrality in the Empire State Building by 2030. These sustainability investments have proven return on investment. We actually do measurement and verification on the back end to make sure that they're all working, but we also have implemented holistic projects, you know, from the windows to the central plant to all the equipment to advanced building management systems and advanced real-time energy management strategies, which have evolved over the last decade and more. And so we're really grateful to NYSERDA for the partnership as these programs advance. We have a target at the Empire State Building for carbon neutrality by 2030, and for the whole portfolio by 2035. Our goal is 80% operational emissions reduction by 2030 and 2035. So it's a pretty heavy target, and we've been doing work for, as I said, over a decade to get the portfolio there. So this is not work that you do in 1 year. This is work that happens over time. And because of our return on investment, sustainability, and embodied carbon focus, we do this work in a very strategic way, right? The last thing we want to do is replace equipment that still has useful life in it. We do a lot of work with innovative reuse, with retro commissioning, and with replacement at the end of life, with the most efficient possible system. So we have some great plans underway. And all of these targets, you know, 80% reductions by 2030, 80% reductions by 2035 will require active tenant engagement, collaboration, lease requirements, and data. So that's some of what we'll talk about today. So I just want to go through some of the big measures that we have implemented already. We never stop. I'm sure the people on this call are familiar with how buildings run. This stuff is never over. So it's not like we do work and it's finished. It's never finished. There's always more to do. Making sure the projects work correctly is a full-time job. Developing new approaches is a full-time job. Evaluating technologies, piloting them, things like that is a tremendous amount of work. And that's where programs like RTEM and NYSERDA's partnership come in. So it's, you know, one way to look at this is, you know, this is a very oversimplified summary, but it is in fact the summary of 8 major projects that we've done in the building already. Each of these single bars on the graph here is actually sometimes thousands of smaller projects within it. But as you can see, you know, the only super straightforward base building projects here is to retrofit the chiller plant and to do a whole wireless BMS backbone in the building. Everything else that we've done and continue to refine are in the tenant space. This was a major lesson that we learned, which is why Thomas said, you know, we've been working with NYSERDA for so long because we started doing this work with NYSERDA's partnership in 2008, looking at things like advanced demand control ventilation, insulation in strategic ways, all in the tenant spaces, retrofitting windows, all in occupied tenant spaces, developing customized tenant energy management system, which we can talk about in more detail, you know, transitioning to all VAV systems with advanced efficiency requirements, moving to advanced lighting controls as a standard. And we still do this, all of this work, but we're committed to more. So these projects have led to a 54% emissions reduction, but we need to get to 80%. And a lot of that comes down to the tenant energy management piece. It's not just performing the measures, it's also making sure that those measures work. And in order to do that, we have to engage with and support tenants who most of the time don't have experts in-house to help with this. So we've done a lot of work with our tenants already. We began when we realized through our energy modeling process how integral the tenant space was. And again, this is in 2008, so way before RTEM existed. And at that time, there were no tenant engagement programs that existed. And so we realized that, you know, in this building, in the Empire State Building, Tenants control between 50 and 65% of the energy usage. And of course, there's an argument to be made that there's a ton of gray area here, because even though we control our central plant, it's serving the needs and requests of our tenants. And so we started to engage our tenants in a way that said, okay, these tenant leases are rolling. We were doing a repositioning of the building in 2008 through 2010. All these new spaces we design and build need to meet high performance, healthy, sustainable design and construction guidelines. And so we created a section of our lease, and we're a green lease leader gold because of this, but our green lease dates back to 2008, and it includes a section on high performance guidelines, very specific. They're comprehensive guidelines across materials, recycling, air quality, and most importantly, frankly, for this work, energy efficiency and emissions reduction. So we're really specific on what to do with all the energy using systems: heating, air conditioning, ventilation, lighting controls, building management, set points, equipment specifications, sub-metering guidance. All of these things, plug load controls, are things that have been specified for performance in our leases since 2008. And then those leases also have clauses around partnership on future codes, and making sure that these high performance standards, once implemented, continue to perform as intended. And I work with all of the incoming tenants in their design teams to make sure that their designs meet our high performance specifications. And then we also wanted to give even more assistance and support to our tenants. Obviously, there's a requirement that all of our tenants are sub-metered for their electrical usage. And I think 100%, nearly 100% of our New York City tenants are sub-metered. All spaces over 2,500 square feet are sub-metered. We worked then to take the model that we had developed for our whole building, retrofit and repositioning, which proves that our investment in energy efficiency has a 3.1 year payback, which is a pretty amazing investment to make. Pretty much beats any other investment that you could make. But more importantly, that same process and payback case applies to the tenant spaces too. And so here you see two examples of our tenant energy optimization process, which we created at the Empire State Building. The first tenants that we did this with were actually Skanska and Global Brands Group in the Empire State Building, or Li & Fung USA. And then we worked with the NRDC and ULI to launch a tenant energy optimization program, which basically took the process of how to optimize performance of a tenant space and codified it into a process that's free and given away online. But the idea is that, for a tenant like NYSERDA, who's in one of our buildings on Broadway, a tenant like LinkedIn, who has 500,000 square feet in the Empire State Building, we have all these tools to help them make their own design decisions in partnership with us and our systems. So they reduce energy use, 20 to 57% below code or code at the time they're designed, with a 2 to 5 year payback. And these are usually 15-year leases. So these are excellent investments for the tenants to make. And all of this comes into obviously real-time energy management, right? Because the systems we're talking about in the design, the only way to verify they keep working and to give, LinkedIn and NYSERDA and our other great tenants support on how they're doing is through real-time energy management programs. So the last two slides that I have are around challenges and opportunities. So challenges for real-time energy management. One of the major challenges is qualified service providers. And that goes both for the design side and for the hardware and software side. So the kind of work that, RTEM 2.0 and Empire State Realty Trust 2.0, net zero carbon goals, these are cutting edge goals, right? And so it'll take cutting edge technology to get there. So we have amazing engineering partners, but the industry is lagging a little bit here. There are lots of ideas and lots of new technologies. It's really hard to keep up with them all. It's really hard to make sure that they work. It's really hard to verify their performance. It's also difficult to know whether these, startups will be in business in 1 year, much less 5 years or 10 years, because we have this building forever. And when we're supporting our tenants, continuity and reliability is a huge part of what we need to deliver to them. So service provider, engineers who are truly qualified to design net zero future projects, we need more training there. And proven technologies was 2 easy words to write, but that's a lot more than just a technology that looks cool in a presentation, right? So to pick on something like a digital twin, for example, is that technology really delivering additive return on investment? Does it really account for occupancy at a level where we can change our systems without sacrificing comfort? What is the additive value of these systems? What's the ROI of these systems? What's the customer service side, so that my team and I are supported and our tenants are also supported, to give them simple, easy communication that's accurate, to know what they're using and how to do better. We just need ways to engage tenants. The tenants have a lot of work to do. This might be their number one concern. So I'll throw the gauntlet out there, for a technology that is straightforward, simple, and long-term reliable, to communicate with the tenants specifically how they're doing and where they have opportunities to do better. And proven technologies to also help with implementing those opportunities and making sure that the payback is there. Because we all want to do what's right, but it's hard to make the case to do what's right if doing what's right doesn't have a good return on investment. And then there's an innovation lag, which kind of ties in. We need these solutions now. We want to do this right away. And so again, the ability to demonstrate affordable, reliable, accurate, and easy to use technologies is really what we need right now. And so I would challenge the industry to focus here. The need for whole building and tenant energy management programs is really important, and it's difficult to keep the operating engineers in mind and how busy they are. So these are things that should be more automated and more transparent. So more than the challenges is how many benefits there are to real-time energy management, and how useful and necessary a program like this is. I will warn you all that RTEM 2.0 paperwork is pretty brutal, but it's worth it. I think it's right of NYSERDA to be really careful how they spend the bucket of money that they have for this. And so, we've raised our hand to say we are happy to be held to that super high standard. We're doing that already. And this is an area where technology is lagging. So the idea of, frankly, like I said earlier, these are new technologies that we have to pilot. So having an incentive to help offset the cost of some of the pilots, which by themselves don't have a 5-year payback, these programs enable me to still do the work that I need to do to satisfy the innovation and performance side of what my stakeholders need. And the incentive makes sure that I'm also delivering the economic returns that my stakeholders need. So instead of saying the cost of a pilot that's not proven is too much, I can't do it, that's exactly where the New York Energy Research and Development Authority comes in and says, you are researching new technologies so we can develop them. That's exactly what programs like this are for. So we're developing and trying the newest cutting edge technologies to make sure they work. So it offsets the cost of the research and development. That ability to evaluate new technologies is critical right now because older existing technologies don't cut it. So we have to make sure that that we're not planning for 2020 or 2022. We're planning for 2030 and 2035, and that requires partnerships to evaluate new technologies, the technologies of the carbon neutral future, not the technologies of the past. And we can't optimize our buildings without tenants. We sent an RFP out over a year ago, actually, for tenant energy management, and we had some wonderful responses from partners. If you're on the call, thank you. And it was interesting because so many of them were still in development with this tool. And so, you know, we actually didn't award it yet. We have an amazing customized tenant energy management program in the Empire State Building with Johnson Controls that is a bespoke solution. But I don't have Metasys in all my buildings. So what I'm looking for is, how do we do tenant energy management everywhere? You know, do we use a proprietary system like Johnson Controls, or do we use a non-proprietary system? Do we work with a smaller company or a larger company? What of these solutions are going to work best for us in the context of our carbon neutrality goals? Do we use the same system for the whole buildings and for the tenant spaces? You know, tenant energy management optimization is not a field that is totally settled yet. So the combination of the need for new technologies that don't exist yet, and the fact that we literally cannot do this without tenants, creates a perfect storm and a perfect time for an advanced real-time energy management incentive program.
Great, thanks, Dana. Thomas, you want to get back on video there? Okay. Hi, everyone. Mike Daschle, Brookfield Properties. I run our sustainability and ESG efforts for our New York City office portfolio. And we're going to dive ahead into questions. So first of all, just I guess some questions from the Q&A. Once you've identified some of these strategies that you want to do with tenants, what do you do along the way? And maybe we'll start with you, Dana, first, to kind of encourage continually following that plan and kind of holding everyone accountable with what's been decided.
Can you repeat that one?
Yep.
So I answer right.
That's okay. So once you kind of identified a strategy that you want to engage with tenants and increase energy efficiency, how do you help kind of keep everyone accountable? And how do you help make sure that they're continuing to do kind of what's prescribed in the plan?
That's an excellent question. And my partner at ESRT, Katie, and I had a cute discussion about this just yesterday, because it's a multi-pronged approach, really. And frankly, part of it now at least has to be very manual. You know, if you want to make sure if someone's daylight dimming is working the way it's supposed to, and that their equipment is going off when no one's there, these are things that we actually have to look at. Even with advanced building management systems, you know, our lighting controls in every tenant space are not tied into that. That's another thing we're trying to do with RTEM, actually. Can we find an affordable way to see all the details of plug loads and lighting loads? Because right now, what we really see in the BMS is mostly HVAC, but we're even missing details on HVAC that give you that minute, seems like minute data, but it actually makes or breaks your performance. We also have to deal with things like nuisance alarms in order to give our tenants an easy, digestible format. So to answer the question specifically, some of it is spot checking. So we do regular audits, or actually we've done detailed energy audits in the majority of our tenant spaces, all of our tenant spaces over 5,000 square feet, and shared those reports with the tenants. During COVID in the lockdown period, I think most of us, I'm sure you did, Mike, saw that our energy decrease when no one was allowed in the buildings was nowhere near where we thought it would be. It was maybe 20%, sometimes 14%. And I was appalled because we do so much work to be efficient. How is this possible? But I knew exactly how it was possible. And there were two reasons all of this ties together. One of which is we still had to deliver comfort conditions per lease, because there were still, if there's one person on the floor, they still need to be delivered their required conditions. The other thing is that all that stuff stays on all the time. So a huge thing we talk about is, we call them vampire loads, is to make sure that things are going off when they're not supposed to be on. That includes lights and all the equipment other than refrigerators and servers, right? And then, you know, so some of this is manual now. We're trying to make it more automated to verify that these things are in place the way we want them. That's actually exactly where RTEM comes in. And then we need a way to make that really easy for tenants. Either we let them know and give it to them to take care of, or is it best for us to take care of it for them? And these are, frankly, the questions of the day.
Absolutely. And I guess on that front too, Thomas, I mean, part of encouraging alignment on this is incentivizing them, right? I mean, so how do we kind of show them with the RTEM program, the before and after, and what they can really benefit from within their space? How do we show them that advantage?
I think, Michael, I think you asked a great question. From this program's perspective, some of it is really depending on, well, a lot of it really depending on the tenant themselves, which type of tenant, whether they have anybody that can serve as the counterpart to even somebody very progressive like the ESRT, and Dana still need somebody on the other side to work with. And that certainly is an element that we recognize. I think part of what we hope that the RTEM plus tenant can do is to essentially add some resources in the form of these consultants and the data, so a building owner could begin to train or offer some training to the tenants themselves in whatever way that they will be willing to engage, whether it's a lunch or dinner or whatever that whether it's the competition involves. We don't pretend that we can define a solution for every building and every tenant in the building, but what we want to do is support the building owners so they can have a bespoke solution with the tenants. Additionally, what we hope to do is with all this learned, so we're putting forth $25 million. And at the end of that, we want to have a lot of different approaches. Some work, some may not, and being able to share those approaches with the greater marketplace, I think will be very useful. Back to you, Michael.
Great. And Dan, I guess one point on top of that with the successful tenant engagements, how do you find the right person in the tenant organizations to engage with? Is it kind of going to the executives and high level? Is it going to the sustainability rep, the office manager? I mean, what have you found to be most useful in that strategy?
Well, I think it's most important that the highest level executives at the company, who is the tenant, give the directive to prioritize sustainability. And with so many data points that we have in the research that's been coming out, for years, but it's even the reports that just came out from the large global real estate providers, the vast majority, like 90+% of tenants do have sustainability goals and carbon neutrality goals. So once the CEO and the CFO, the C-suite's engaged, we often will work with partners, frankly, it's often an office manager is our contact. And that's part of why it's important to make this easy for them. They're not engineers. And so we have to give this to them in a way that makes it easy for them. Or like I said, we're debating now the best way to do that. Is it best? And frankly, I would say it's much more cost effective for them if we do it at scale in our portfolio, and say this might have cost you $1,000 if you did it yourself, but it'll be $500 because we're doing it building wide, and just pass through the direct cost for the fixes to the tenant.
Yeah, makes sense. I'll pull one question from the audience Q&A here. So, Thomas, can you expand a little bit on what NYSERDA requires in terms of data quality, cybersecurity measures? That seems to be front of mind with a lot of this information sharing discussion.
Yeah. First of all, I think those are really table stakes. You won't sell many, if any, of your system without some basic making sure that your customer are confident that you can get good data, as well as it is a secure connection all throughout the building, not just in the connection outside of the, going outside the building. Sometimes people pay a lot of attention to that part of it and forget everything else, that kind of stuff. So what we do is we make sure they have, during our qualification process, we make sure that they have a minimum. And that is done through a combination of answer a pretty intrusive set of survey questions, and then followed by a demo. So we do ask questions. We have had to In the early on in the 1.0 program, we have had to reject vendors that did not have those. But the other thing about bringing in something like machine learning, even though it's still a relatively early stage, part of the technology is we really believe that data, whatever algorithm work or don't work, but data itself is the new oil. that that keeping the data, having a good data workflow, having a place to put the data, to manage data, to normalize the data, and all the other stuff like that is really going to be should be part of a good business process. And so that's also the other part of it is if the in-use algorithms, the use cases are constantly requiring good data, then the owners and therefore their vendors will put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the data are reliable, are accurate, and when they're not, they're quickly identified. So you don't get, you don't miss days and weeks, months of data, which is unthinkable. But you have to catch it early and fix whatever problem is behind the data error. It's usually something trivial, right? Somebody kick out a connection or something silly, or the IT folks change the routing rules and in their gateway, and all of a sudden, you're not getting data. But you are absolutely correct. Data quality, making sure that good data practice is followed, and second, security. If you don't have that, you're not going to get customers in New York.
Yep. Dane, another one from the Q&A. You had mentioned previously your success on the green leasing program. Are there any specifics that you could share about the types of things that you would want to put in a green lease that have had particularly good effect?
Sure. I would refer everyone to the Institute for Market Transformation's website. The Institute for Market Transformation does an amazing job with the Green Lease Leaders program. And I've worked with them for a long time. So shout out to Cliff and Audi, who are always great to work with. But they've gotten feedback from many of us in the owner side of things, and also from brokers. So, in this program, I think launched in like 2010. Sorry if I'm wrong on that. It's been around for a while. And so when we were first writing the first energy aligned lease clause with Urban Green and the Deutsche Bank in New York City, when we were kicking off Bloomberg's Plan YC work, we knew that green leases would have to be part of the solution. So, green lease clauses, number one, have a methodology for data collection and holding a tenant and an owner responsible for the whether it's emissions, utility usage, but also things like water and waste and indoor environmental quality. That's all things that can be measured. So number one, I think for the green leasing is to have a methodology of measurement and attribution, and sharing the data openly between owners and tenants. So most of the time it's me who should be the one sub-metering them and telling them what they use, but I need them to agree to that when they build out their space and to sub-meter it correctly, to trace the wires correctly so that I know what's lighting and plug and HVAC, which feed then back into the tenant energy management program. So that's like so much simpler than in real life, but that's one of our major things, is that what we really need to see is not just all your electrical usage. We want to be able to see categories. So where is your lighting? Where's your HVAC? Where's your equipment? Where's your servers? Where's your IT loads? That can be done not for a lot of extra money, just by disciplining the electrical engineer and the electrical contractor to assign circuits so that we can see where these things are. That doesn't require sub panels. So those are intrinsic industry challenges that we have. And that's something that should go into your green lease. Same with the high performance guidelines that I talked about. That's part of our green lease. Reviewing the design documents before they go to bid should be part of your green lease. We have something called a use it or lose it clause. So brokers ask for 6 watts a foot, but tenants, we're trying to hold our tenants to 2 or 3. So we'll give you 6 watts in your lease if you make us say that, but we give you a year to use it or lose it, right? Because if every owner has to design for every tenant using 6, but you're really using 2, that results in a very inefficient and overexpensive infrastructure that can't be supported by the buildings or the grid. And so we really need education there. So what we say is, like, unless you want to pay extra to have 6 watts when you're using 2, you know, there has to be a partnership there. So those are some of the pieces, and also shared investment in whole building energy optimization, right? The split incentive that Thomas mentioned is real. And all the financials that I have to do to make the business case to my board to invest in the measures that we invest in for carbon zero futures, you know, we have to demonstrate that return on investment in the context of landlord tenant partnership, because there are times that the owner spends the money, but the tenant would get the savings. So we need to resolve for an energy aligned lease clause, a cost share, so that the person paying for the measure gets the savings, or yeah, basically the person paying for the measure gets the savings, because that's where we get the payback.
Yeah, makes sense. I think probably one last question, if we have time for Thomas, just to expand a little bit on the program. Do you confirm it's available statewide, commercial, residential, any other specifics on the availability of the program that you want to share?
Sure. The RTEM plus tenant program is really designed for urban areas like the New York City, is aimed at office buildings with office tenants. We do have 2 remaining part of the RTEM 1.0 program that is still active in looking for projects. One is for multifamily, and that's both market rate and rent control. So those we are still actively soliciting projects. The other one, we also have a small portion of the 1.0 program that's geared towards small and medium size properties. You know, everything we talk about today, you know, Local Law 97, Local Law 88, all these local laws really apply to, and particularly challenging big buildings, tall buildings. You know, Dana's building is a landmark that makes her work even more challenging. But we also wanted to handle some of the other sectors. But RTEM plus tenant is really geared toward tall buildings, office buildings with tenant in urban areas.
Great, thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Nina, I think we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I think so. But thank you so much, Thomas and Dana and Michael, especially for moderating. Thank you all for your presentations. I think I can speak for the audience as well, that this has been really informative. And thanks to our attendees for sticking around. I'll also note we've had some questions about the slides. We will be posting the slides and event recording at be-exchange.org in the days following the program, and we'll also email those out to all the attendees today. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and hope to see you soon virtually.